Thank you so much for coming on the pod. I'm just curious about what led you down this path of improvement and healing.
Well, thank you for having me. I used to actually be an insolvency accountant.
Wow.
I was hoping insolvency, dealing with bankruptcies and people going through company bankruptcies, it would be a kind of stable career, but was also helping people. And it was not the case. I remember stages where we were evicting someone who had 5 children, and there was no emotional support with that. It was very just, here's by the book. And luckily that was one of my colleagues' files, but it was so disheartening. And then classic avoidant attachment style, I was like, you know what's going to fix this problem? I'll move to Canada.
That'll do the trick.
Exactly. Worked as a bartender for a little bit, go snowboarding.
Whereabouts? Vancouver?
Toronto.
Toronto, cool.
Did about 6 months travel with that, and then came back. Surprisingly, the problem hadn't fixed itself. Then I knew I didn't want to go back into that accounting role, and so one of my sister's friends was opening a therapist clinic and was like, hey, we need some admin. And I was like, easy. At least I have a nice face when people enter the door. It's still healing. I don't know what I want to do, but that's a nice step. And across the road, there was this acupuncture clinic. Every single day I'd look at it and be like, I'm going to go there. Finally booked it, but I booked the wrong place. Which ended up being the right place, of course. We do 15 minutes of needles in the new acupuncture clinic, and then he goes, hey, do you want to try this thing called psychokinesiology? And I thought, I'm already here. I've never done acupuncture. I'll do anything. And I'd been going to therapy for years at this stage and hadn't really had that aha moment.
Sure.
There was no, there was small improvements, but there wasn't the big moment that you kind of want. And then that first session of psychokinesiology, I had that big aha moment. So I booked back the second week and he was like, hey, do you want a job? And I was like, yes, please.
No way.
So I worked and trained under him for a few years.
Wow.
And then started seeing my own clients with psychokinesiology after doing all the training, and then traveled the world with it.
Really?
Now kind of grounding again in Bondi, just trying to share this practice with everyone because it was something that was so transformational for me.
And so can you explain what psychokinesiology is?
Yeah, so in Chinese medicine, they say that every emotion is held in the body, but not only in the body, in every organ. So there's around 10 to 12 emotions held in the 10 major organs. So you use your energy to see which of your organs is most stressed.
Right.
And then after that, you can see which of the 10 to 12 emotions it's holding. And then not only that, what age you started carrying it and who it was in regards to.
Wow, so you can get quite specific about it.
Yeah, so instead of going to talk therapy and going, hi, tell me about your mother, you go, tell me about that low self-love that you were feeling when you were 12 in relation to your father.
Wow.
And then during that, we write different beliefs down. So say you were getting yelled at a lot and you might have said, it's not safe for me to speak my truth. That would have served you for that period of your life. Now, if you're, 30, living with that belief still, that's really limiting.
Yeah.
So then we use different color light therapy to create new neural pathways and change that belief.
I love
so you
this.
leave with a new identity.
Right, so you're excavating that narrative.
Yeah.
That served you at the time because it was protecting you and keeping you safe, but it's not really helping you at the moment.
No, and the body can tell you so much.
And through that process of accepting it and making peace with the old narrative, do you find that people have quite a transformation when they're able to reclaim that energy?
So much. I've had people be like, I felt dead for 12 years. And it depends on what aspect you're working with. Sometimes people can be dealing with relationship fears, and then a month later they're like, I fell in love and I found the love of my life. And it's all because they've changed that belief within themselves. And so they're able to see things that they would have shut off before.
It's fascinating. I've come to learn just how much control we do have over changing those old stories and those old beliefs. And I guess a lot of people maybe aren't aware that they have the power to do that. The best way for me to do that has been accessing my subconscious, whether it's before I'm going to bed, and journaling out things and trying to rewrite old narratives. But you mentioned that psychokinesiology actually uses different colors of glasses and different shades of colors.
You're looking through maybe orange glasses from the top right to the bottom left, and that brings back a memory the same way that smelling orange flavored soap might bring that, but back a memory. When people are in that theta brainwave state, so that before bed, after you wake up, it is really easy to reprogram the subconscious, but psychokinesiology is more similar to EMDR therapy. So you're accessing that past belief and that past memory and then changing how you see it. Gotcha. Instead of working with the subconscious directly.
And are you finding patients obviously come to you when they've got something they want to work through, but is it good for people who might not realize that they're living according to some old beliefs and they have a bit of a discovery process when they see you as well?
I love it even more when people come in being like, I just want to be better than who I am. Like, not necessarily trying to focus on something, because then we're working with the conscious mind, but instead being like, something's holding me back. I don't know what it is. Let's explore. Just
a feeling of not really hitting their potential and trying to uncover some blocks along the way.
Exactly. And the body's always going to hold something. It's never going to take you to a stage where you are re-traumatized again. It's never going to take you, it's always going to show you what you need to know.
I saw a chiropractor just out of curiosity to see if there was anything I could improve. And she did work in Chinese medicine as well. And I remember she did this exercise where I would hold up my arms and put pressure against her hands. And she noticed that when certain movements had less pressure and less strength, that was an indication that one of my organs wasn't functioning as well. So with this hand, it wasn't very strong. And she said instantly, oh, it's your gallbladder. Your gallbladder's a bit weak. Put me on some fish oil and that fixed it up. It's incredible how you can tell with such specificity what's going on with the organs.
It's the exact same thing. I use a different muscle test, but it's just testing where there's stress in the body, where the emotions are actually causing you a physical weakness. Because we also get physical strength from our emotions too, which is why people can lift cars off babies. It's all an emotional issue. Whether it's going to negatively affect you or positively affect you is whether you choose to deal with it or not.
Do you get real-time results with your patients, or is it something they need to go have the fish oil and then come back? Are there ever transformations right on the spot?
So many are right on the spot. So one of my favorite ones actually was for myself. So I feel really comfortable telling this story instead of a patient one. But I had gone through a breakup. I then did a year of celibacy and I was like, great. And then it passed the year and I was like, why am I staying with this? Like, I've done the year. Why not just open myself up again to it? And then I was speaking to my old boss about it and being like, okay, let's do some psychokinesiology around this specific problem. And then we changed one of the beliefs, and within that, to the literal minute, I'd got a message from someone that I'd met at a party that I didn't even give my number to, who got my number from someone else and then asked me on a date. Just like everything it's so precise sometimes.
Really? Yeah.
You're like, that's
not a coincidence. Yeah.
No, it happens too often for it to be a coincidence to me.
How does social media come into it for you? Obviously, you've got a love of creating and sharing your ideas. Is that something that comes naturally for you? Is it something more recent or?
When I was an accountant, I had no thoughts of being like, I need to share accounting with everyone because that's not really going to benefit people. But if you go, hey, this yoga pose is actually going to release this emotion, or by tapping in and getting in touch with the anxiety that's held in the stomach, you could release that and just kind of sit with that. That is going to help not only your mental health, but your physical health and just your life in general. And so after that, I was like, okay, well, people should know that.
Sure. And it's a way to reach people at scale as well. With your work, you might be working with one patient at the moment. With your videos, you can touch people all over the world.
It makes me really happy.
And what sort of topics do you find light you up the most when you're creating?
I love the emotions in your body, because for me, I'm like, it makes so much sense, and every session that I do, it still wows me.
Without talking about any specific patients, what are some examples of how we carry emotions in our body?
What I find really funny and really interesting is that so many people hold the same beliefs. So one of the favorite ones to change in people and to release in people is that it's safe to be happy. So many people don't feel that it is ever safe to be happy. And because if you don't feel like something's safe, you're never going to do it. And so people have been living, 20, 30 years avoiding things that are going to bring them joy.
Right.
And then once they change that, their whole life changes, because admittedly, it can be a bit tense because then they go, oh, this relationship's terrible. I'm dumping them. I hate this job. I'm getting rid of that job. I'm going to move countries and I'm going to do that. And it seems really dramatic. Yeah. And it is. It is. But also it's something that they've secretly wanted for so long, but they've never had the courage to do.
Right.
Because once they change it, they go, oh, it's safe to be happy.
I finally have permission to release this casual guilt or shame that I'm carrying around each day. I can relate to that as well. I was beating myself up for being on my phone too much. And obviously there are bad habits and you can't spend too much time on your phone. But as someone who relies on it for my work, it's okay to be on my phone during the day. And I was speaking to my coach about it. He highlighted that might be a way that I'm casually shaming myself during the day. It's okay to use your phone, use it intentionally, don't overuse it, but don't feel guilty for using a tool that's essential for your business. And that really got me thinking, oh shit, yeah, that's an example of a way that I'm carrying shame around my day for no good reason. And once I was able to shine a light on that, feels like I've been able to repurpose that little bit of shame into more happiness. Do you think that casual shame element is a part of why people don't give themselves permission to be happy?
100%. Are you familiar with the themes of consciousness at all?
Probably not. Give me a look.
Got a little printout.
I have seen this before. I found this very, very interesting. At the very bottom, there's shame, and there's 20 steps up to enlightenment all the way at the top. And towards the top of the frequency range, there's love and joy, freedom. And down the bottom, there's fear, grief, and hopelessness. I don't know if I did a great job at explaining that.
No, you did amazing.
I remember seeing that for the first time, and seeing it laid out like that was really, really helpful.
It's incredible. So I did my yoga teacher training with the yoga couple who wrote a book called The Inner Work, which is a bestseller on Amazon. And they go through literally a month of how to be a healer and work with people through the themes of consciousness. And by looking at shame, you go, okay, shame is feeling like you're unlovable and that everything you're doing is wrong. And it's like, you're not unlovable. Not everything you're doing is wrong. But then you look at guilt and judgment and you go, okay, instead of judging myself for what I'm doing using my phone too much, just instead go, okay, what's the consequence of this? In your circumstance, it's that you're doing work. The consequence of you being on your phone is that you're doing work, and maybe, God forbid, you're having a bit of a relax as well sometimes. Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
And then you get through all these different stages, and ironically, my favorite emotion is anger because it's the catalyst for change.
Interesting.
So in the themes of consciousness, underneath anger is desire. So when we don't get something we desire, we get angry. Like you're driving and you expect everyone to be a good driver around you, and when they're not, you get angry. And then after that is pride, and you can go, okay, I deserve to have good drivers around me, or I deserve this. But the funny thing is, anger is going to teach you where you need to make change. And then your pride is going to teach you whether you're actually going to and whether you think you're worthy of it. But the next step is courage. And that's something most people will never get to with a lot of items, because they go, oh, if I'm angry at this person I'm in a relationship with and I think I deserve better because they just cheated on me, being courageous would be leaving that relationship. And that's so scary for so many people.
The change element.
The change element, the courage that each of us have to face in so many different aspects of life is one of the most amazing things. And so with my online coaching, that's kind of where you aim to get people to courage, because then after that, it's neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason and logic. And this might get cut out and that's okay. One of my favorite things about Jung versus Sigmund Freud is that Sigmund Freud kind of thought that reason and logic was the top of who we are. Like there's no God, there's nothing higher than us. Except Jung went, no, I think there is something higher. And so the idea in the themes of consciousness is that Sigmund Freud kind of stopped at reason and logic, right, whereas Jung went to that love and that joy element. I love that. Love that.
That's so cool. What I remember being really helpful using the themes of consciousness was when I do identify that there might be a bit of anger or fear in my body, firstly accepting that and then rewriting it or trying to view that event with love and joy and applying those higher spectrum emotions to it, is that a good way to clear out those lower vibration emotions?
I don't like the term clearing out lower vibration emotions because I think it can, to some people, myself included in my past, would just be like toxic positivity. Like I was very much like, everything is love, everything. And in reality, life's a bit shit sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be grieving, and it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to be prideful sometimes. But if you always go, no, I don't need to grieve about that, then it just gets stuck in the body because every unprocessed emotion will then be held until it's processed. So I think feel it fully, and then move on.
Yeah, okay, sure. Really shine a light on those lower emotions. So one example I think of to feel anger fully, this works for me. I do UV saunas and do it for 40 minutes. And in that last 10 minutes, I use that to lean into anger. And I might not be thinking about anything in particular, but it's just this intense environment where I like to get angry, and I use that as a way to try and cycle out some anger that's within. What would be some other examples if someone is experiencing anger or fear? What would be a great way for them to feel it?
With anger specifically, so it's held in the liver. So that's the right rib, like lower ribs. So tapping onto this area, breathing into this area. And I think there's a difference between realizing that you're feeling an emotion and acting out of that emotion. I think, as a teenager, I went through that thing where I didn't even know what my emotions were. I just knew that something happened and I was yelling now and I was really unhappy. And I didn't realize that that was coming from anger. Because I didn't understand what my emotions actually felt like within me. So journaling about something that brought an extreme emotion, and then sitting with that and being like, okay, where in my body do I feel this? Because your emotions are held in the organs, but your meridians carry those emotions throughout the body, and they're held everywhere. So one of my friends has, she feels anger in her fingers, which I'm like, great, fantastic. If that's there's no wrong way of how to feel an emotion.
Sure.
But as long as you're getting in touch with what the somatic feeling is, I think is really important.
So on your travels, where were you traveling?
I spent a couple of months in Bali, Thailand for about 4 or 5 months, teaching at a Muay Thai studio, doing yin yoga and running little retreats and workshops and working as a healer while I was over there, which was absolutely brilliant.
Did you feel like that environment really allowed you to step into your worth?
I think whenever you travel, you're away from whatever you're used to and your limiting beliefs that just your surroundings create. So you go somewhere and you're like, I could tell someone a completely different name. They're never going to know any different.
Yeah.
And so
Susie the Fire Woman.
Exactly. And so it allows you that freedom from traveling. And then because I stayed at this location for quite a few months, it was a hippie, small community in the north of Thailand. Everyone was very accepting of alternative therapies and healing, whereas I'd come from Sydney where I was like, so this is psychokinesiology, and people would stare at me like I've got another head, and I was like, okay, well,
a bit more rigid and old school.
Exactly. I think that's why Bondi, as well, is everyone's a bit curious. No one has a straight no, which they do more in the city where I was working before.
You had a video which was all about having feelings of inadequacy. I think we all suffer from feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome and sometimes not feeling enough. What advice would you have that you covered in the video would you have for people who might be feeling that little bit of inadequacy?
We sometimes forget other people are human as well. And we put people on these really high pedestals where we go, oh, I couldn't possibly, it's just something those people can do. But we're all human. We're all able to do it. Sure, some people have been given amazing advantages, and sure, all these other aspects come into play of it, but it's not something that you can't do.
Yeah, because I've suffered from this as well. And I thought it might have been of a feeling of inadequacy doing this podcast, for example, thinking that I'm not good enough to do the podcast, but later realized that it was more just a lack of confidence because I hadn't been doing it. So of course you're not going to be confident in something that you haven't done yet. And you've just got to trust the process and trust that you will build that confidence. And I got to say, I don't feel as inadequate now.
We don't put ourselves in rooms that other people do, even if they have the exact same skill set, but they have confidence and we don't. So they get the job and then we go, oh, of course they would. They're so much better than me, or I'm so much worse than them, whatever that story is. Like how I ended up on the podcast, I'd just been like, oh, you know what? I'm going to message this person. This sounds great. And then not only, okay, I'll tell you the story. So
yeah, let's go through it.
I was going through all different people in Bondi because I just got here, just trying to see who the main people in Bondi are, getting to know like this kind of social aspect of it. And then I messaged you being like, great. And then afterwards, within that theta brainwave state, just before I went to bed, I was like, okay, I've messaged. So number one, I've taken aligned action. And then in that subconscious reprogramming state, I was visualizing, I was like, yes, he's going to, do the free session and then he's going to ask me on the podcast and this and that. And then I fell asleep and the next morning you'd followed me and asked me on the podcast.
That's so cool.
Except not taking that aligned action, that never would have happened even if I did that visualization.
I was just talking to Sarah, who was my guest on the podcast, and she was saying that with manifesting, not only do you have to visualize what you want success to be, but you have to take that action. And I think a lot of people might not actually take the action.
It's that courageous part of it. It's like you know what? I may be left on red. It may never be seen. There may be absolutely no point in me putting effort in. But you know what?
What do you got to lose?
Could be a fun story.
What do you find, what content do you find gets received the most by your audience? Are there any themes that people respond to?
The yoga kriyas. I also get the most hate comments on that as well.
So it's a bit polarizing.
So I'm a Himalayan Kriya teacher. So I just did a Himalayan Kriya course with a guru from Bali. And whilst the guru does put things on Instagram and shares her classes and shares short tips, it is something that is usually only taught guru to student. And even in 2023, it is one of the few things, and a few other yoga lineages are not on the internet.
Really?
Because they're that powerful and they're working more with the energy body than the physical body. And so in extreme cases, they can cause spiritual psychosis. They can cause really negative things to happen. And so I got a lot of hate comments of it being like, you shouldn't be teaching people this. This is such a powerful practice. And I'm like, I know it's such a powerful practice.
Do you think they're trying to protect the idea or they're concerned for people's safety?
I think both. Like, I think there's always that loving protection of something that you hold dear. And you're like, I want to make sure that the people who are teaching this hold this as sacred, which I definitely do. But also I trust that it's going to reach the right audience. And I trust that I'm not teaching things that are, that nth degree. Instead, they are something that is just going to be very beneficial. But also I think there is that element of this should be done in the way that it's always been done. And right. I don't like that aspect.
It sounds amazing. I'd love to learn more about it, but it sounds like an important thing to get out there. And
it was Steve Jobs' favourite book and practice from when he was a teenager to his literal deathbed.
Really?
Yeah, The Autobiography of a Yogi was his favourite book, which is all about Himalayan Kriya Yoga. And it's a lot of people assume that's why he had such incredible ideas, because he was such a clear channel for something higher to kind of flow through him.
Wow. In a practical sense, with normal yoga, you're on your mat, you're doing downward dog and all the things. It's the same sort of thing? You're on the mat as well or no?
You've got a mat. And that's about where it stops.
Different movements.
Completely.
Different poses.
It's repetitive movement, so it can just be breathing, twisting from the ribs upwards, breathing into the left, exhaling, twisting to the right, with your hands on your shoulders, except doing that for 1.5 minutes. Okay. And that way you're activating the spine, you're using different energy. And so it's not, instead of, flow from downward dog to warrior one to this to that, it's stay in this pose for this period of time. It is all about cultivating energy, bringing energy up the spine, and then releasing what doesn't serve you with Kale breath. It's not your regular yoga class.
It sounds chaotic.
Hilarious. Because you're like, oh, I'm going to go to a nice yoga class. And then there's people screaming next to you and you're like, oh, what did I get into?
Vomiting. That sounds great. Do you incorporate breathwork into your toolbox of self-care?
Definitely. Another way that you can change a belief is, especially centering the breath around the heart is a really nice way to do it. And then inhale, center the breath on the heart, and then exhale, say the belief out loud. And so that's a nice way to incorporate, again, the mind and body connection. But using that heart space and the electromagnetic field that is the heart, it's actually the largest electromagnetic field that we have. And so it expands our intuition, expands so much of us. And
the field. And can you repeat that process again? You breathe in, thinking of a...
So just breathing into the heart space and then exhaling and be like, it's safe to, or whatever the belief is. So it's I'm loved as I am, or something like that.
Right, okay.
So, and then just again, keeping maybe your hands on your heart or focus on that heart as well.
I've recently more discovered the power of breathwork. I've found a breathwork that was recommended to me. It's on YouTube and it's a simple 2-part breathwork where it's double inhale and exhale. That might make it a 3-part. But you do this for 30 minutes. It's such a huge pressure release and it takes me to a really euphoric place. I start to see really clearly in my life who's important to me. And I also can identify where I'm holding on to fear and I'm inspired to take action on things. It's such a transformative breathwork. It's really, in terms of immediate impact, for me, it's just been incredible. So I'll include that link in the description below. But do you do any sort of breath work like that where it's half an hour of intense breathing?
So when I was living in Thailand, almost daily, I'd go to this 2-hour breathwork class and then ice baths afterwards. And It was something where I've never had such psychedelic experiences apart from that breathwork. It was that powerful. But in my daily life, I'll usually do a heart-centered breath or one. So both of my grandmothers passed at the beginning of the year, so I was grieving quite a lot. And obviously from what I do, I was like Googling all the yogi tips for grief, everything that I could. And if you inhale through your nose and then exhale short, sharp so it's like a
5 times?
4 or 5. It actually kind of stops you crying at times when you really don't want to cry.
Oh, really?
And it helps you deal with that grief. And it's not suppressing it in the body, but it's releasing it in a way that isn't, a blubbering mess of tears, which is really helpful sometimes.
So, yeah, it's not suppressing the emotion, but it's just stopping the physical crying.
It's changing the energy release.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So in energy releases, maybe it is going to be burping, crying, laughing, all of that. So you can kind of mold how the energy is going to get released, even though it's going to come out in some way, or it's going to get stored in the body.
Another topic that you've covered on socials, which I loved, and it's kind of in line with the feelings of inadequacy thing, but it's all about seeing and being open to all the different ways love is given to us and not actually receive what other people are giving to us. So, yeah, how can we be more aware of all the love that's around us and that we're receiving?
I think the love language is a perfect way to start, and then looking at how you're giving it before how you're receiving it. Because it's really easy to notice what you do compared to what others do, because you also realize your intention and you're like, oh, I was going to go get a coffee, or like you realize the steps that you could have taken instead of just the actual actions. And so when you go, okay, I'm going to start to classify, hey, I've given this person a really nice compliment, or I like to challenge, what way can I include all 5 love languages together? And because that for me, when someone gives it to me, is like I'm in tears.
It feels amazing.
It's the best.
Yeah.
So when you go, okay, this person's given me love, this person's given me a compliment, whatever it may be, accepting it as love, even if it's something that you don't necessarily see as love.
Right.
But a question for you, what do you see love as?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The word that comes to me is nurture and care. If I can see that someone cares for me or, might be doing something nurturing, that feels like love for me. And joy, I guess, experience joy with someone. I feel like there's love there. What do you think?
It's a question I'm still working on, to be honest, because there's so many different types of love. It can be self-love, romantic love, friendship, family, and all of them are the same, but expressed in such a unique way. So I think for me, it's appreciation, but it doesn't sum it up. I don't have the word for it yet.
Yeah. When you talk like that, it's a very broad word, isn't it? It's not something that we can define easily.
No, and I think for me, having that definition would be a lot easier, because it's something that you go, okay, this person appreciates me, or this person, I have joy when I'm around them, or I feel nurtured when I'm around them, or, they've expressed the different love languages to me.
How important do you think it is for people to be aware of their love languages especially in a relationship environment, so that you can focus on them and nurture your relationship that way?
So important. Not only just relationships, but friendships as well. Like, if I know that someone's love language is acts of service, fantastic. I will wash the dishes and I will feel happier because I know that you're going to appreciate it. It's not something that you just get to go, oh, well, I love you. That kind of means nothing.
Right.
Like, it's a fantastic thing, but I think showing someone that you love them, whether it is through any of those love languages, it's something that you feel instead of you just hear.
You're showing them how you love, and you're giving that to them instead of just saying a few words.
Exactly. And I think we all, with love, go, okay, have this feeling of inadequacy, or this feeling of maybe they don't love me, or all these aspects, when in reality, there's so many studies that go, you are so much more appreciated and valued and cared for than you actually think that you are. And there was one in Yale, I think it was, where they looked at roommates for years, and then every single one, they were like, oh, my roommate doesn't like me that much. And then their roommate would be like, oh, my roommate doesn't like me that much. Except their roommates loved them so much more than they thought that they did.
Yeah.
Like, you are so much more appreciated than you think that you are.
Yeah. Why do you think this is? Where do you think this comes from?
We don't appreciate ourselves as much as other people do. We see our flaws so much clearer, and other people see the wonderful aspects of us so much more. Like, at the moment, I'm like, this person does not want to be my friend. Reality, you may want to be.
Yeah.
And you know what? Either way, I don't know what you're thinking. So why not think the best?
I love that. You have the choice to choose that. So why would we be self-defeating and choose things that aren't going to serve us?
It's not fun. You don't live a good life when you go, oh, that person doesn't want to be my friend. That person hates me. You close yourself off to so much.
Yeah. You get to choose what you think the other person is thinking of you. So why not choose something really positive?
You know what? You can always be wrong. And it's better to be wrong and then just think something good until it's bad than think something's bad until it's good. Because, like, there's that thing saying about anxiety where it's like, either you can be anxious about something and fear it for a long period of time, or you can be fine with it and then just deal with it when it happens. And it may never happen. And so either you can live in fear for so long, or you can just be like, you know what? If it happens, it happens. And I know saying that makes it seem very trivial and like you can just change it. And there is obviously work that you need to do to release it, but you don't have to live in this fear. It doesn't serve anyone. It's kind of, it's encapsulating.
Yeah, a fear of an imaginary future that may never happen. You're right. Let's just say deal with it when it happens and then worry about it later. So much of anxiety is that, isn't it? It's being worried about future events that probably won't happen. It's just an exercise in being more present. What about dealing with overwhelm? Say someone has a lot on their plate, many different projects. They want to execute on all of them, as we all do, and they're in that process, they're actually not executing on anything. They're procrastinating because they've got too much on their plate. Would you have any advice on how we could approach a situation like that?
So 2 aspects. Number 1 is, I love like the pyramid aspect of it. So you go, what's tier 1? What's tier 1 for the next week, for the next month? And any other project, that can be tier 2. And maybe there's 8 tiers and you work your way down it. But being like, okay, I've leveled how much I appreciate or the timelines that are relevant to this. And then secondly, looking at the themes of consciousness again. To go through hopelessness, you need to go from guilt and judgment into grief. So it's guilt and judgment, overwhelm, grief. And no one really wants to go into grief. It's a lot easier to kind of slide back down into guilt and judgment and judge yourself again.
Interesting.
So when you are feeling that overwhelm, be like, okay, this is a time where I kind of do need to let something go. Or I need to let myself kind of change and whatever I'm used to get released so I can change that. But you need to accept that change is happening and there's a grief aspect to that. And then going into fear after grief, which, again, not the easiest process.
Not fun. Yeah. Doesn't sound too appealing.
No. I see why it's a lot easier to go back to guilt and judgment and you just stay there and you constantly judge yourself and then you slip back into shame and then you think you're unlovable and then you go, oh, I'll just hit overwhelm again. And it's kind of easy. It's paralyzing to stay there, but it's also easy to stay there.
One of the takeaways I've had from that chart as well is just seeing shame being right down on the bottom of the list and having a visual representation of just how much energy that can suck from us. That was helpful for me because we're always trying to optimize our energy throughout the day and we don't often realize how much our emotions are draining that energy. So yet becoming aware of the shame and the guilt that we're carrying around, and once we accept that and shine a light on that, we can repurpose that energy into something good. And I think that's a really empowering way to look at it.
100%. I think when you're exiting guilt, looking instead of judging yourself, looking at the consequences was something for me that was one of the most transformational things, because that's somewhere that I really sat being like, it's easy to judge yourself, not only for your actions, but for your thoughts. And it's this really, really tight spiral that is so self-defeating. And then once you kind of accept it and let go of that and accept yourself a bit more and release those inadequacies and get courageous, it's kind of, I've never felt more energized. I've never felt happier. I've never felt better about my life.
Very cool. I think the title of this podcast should be Get Courageous. Going to take a quick left turn here. Cold showers.
Yes.
I know you're an advocate. I am a massive advocate of cold showers. Talk to me about the benefits and why people should incorporate cold showers into their lives.
So cold showers are absolutely phenomenal. Not only are they really good at improving circulation, they reduce inflammation, and because of that reduced inflammation, it can actually reduce pain, which don't we all want a painless life?
Yeah, I know I do.
Improves your metabolism, which leads to weight loss just by having a 10-second cold shower.
Yeah.
Combats depression, as well as if you go from hot to cold especially. So have a nice warm shower, end it with 10 seconds of cold. It's going to improve your immunity, so you're going to get sick less.
Yeah. I mean, since I've been doing it, I have not been sick once. What I love about cold showers is that it's such a mental victory as well. The last thing I want to do in the morning is, especially when it's 11 degrees outside, is jump into a cold shower. But what I've found is that, one, your body acclimatizes to it. The cold now isn't as cold as what it used to be for me. And that little victory you can carry into the rest of the work for the rest of the day.
100%. And your serotonin levels, I think it is, for the next 3 to 4 hours after the cold shower are boosted. So just a little bit of discomfort makes your day so much better. And after 10 days, I think it is, something about your pores close a lot quicker, so you don't feel the cold.
Oh, wow.
You don't feel that discomfort. And so you're able to get into not only discomfort physically, but also when you're doing work, you're like, okay, I can sit in this discomfort. It's safe to. And again, you're writing yourself that permission to be uncomfortable. A cold shower is such a simple way to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's so safe. It's so beneficial. And there's so many other ways that are uncomfortable that are so dangerous.
It's accessible to everybody. Everyone's got a shower. Everyone can easily jump in. One way which helps me deal with it is I imagine I'm outside at the beach. Like you jump onto a shower after the beach. It's always cold. Just imagine you're there. You've got the view. It might make it a little bit easier.
And I think one of the most interesting aspects of it is it jumps you into fight or flight mode really easily. And what I found out recently was that women actually have a fifth. So there's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which are the four main ways that people go into fight or flight or go into that stress response. And fawn is that aspect of people pleasing or codependency, which a lot of people think that that's just them as a person, but they're kind of in this complete stress response. And then women as well have a fifth one, or people who are very feminine have a fifth fight or flight response, which is they need to talk through things.
Right.
And so by jumping in that cold shower, you can realize what of those five you naturally go into.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. What's yours? What do you go into?
I usually go fawn or talk or freeze. Right. Depends on the week, really. But
is the talking a funny one if you're by yourself?
I will start laughing. I will just have mainly ice baths as soon as I get in. With the Wim Hof method, you're meant to do a humming to kind of release that energy. I cannot hum for the life of me. I will start giggling or singing or something that it's this expressiveness.
Yeah.
And it just calms the nervous system down again. And it also makes the morning a bit fun, being like, I've just had a nice sing-along in the shower. This should be part of a movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the acoustics in the bathroom make you sound like you're Beyonce.
Exactly.
Just... Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. Now, I can't let you go before I ask you the question which I ask everyone before they leave, which is, who are you becoming? Who is the version of Annabel that you're aspiring to step into each day, the highest version of yourself?
I'm becoming the version of me that serves the most people, that can give the most of herself every day without overgiving.
Thank you so much for coming on the pod, and really appreciate what you're doing, and look forward to seeing you around.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you
you
so much for having me.
Of course.